Aeneg by Caitlin Louw. Chapter 1. Are you sure this is the right place? Silas asked anxiously. His voice echoed softly off whatever rubble was left in the dilapidated building. It's really quiet. Besides the soft hum of the weapons strapped to their wrists, he was right. Would you relax? Mayish hissed softly, his heavy accent slipping through in the face of his amusement at the newbie's anxiety. You're even making me nervous, he admitted, as they rounded a corner and entered a long corridor. Our jets are just outside, so just calm the hell down. Well, yeah, the young blonde hissed, keeping close behind his mentor. I know that, but did my first mission really have to be a sunset call? Boo! Silas screamed like a little girl as he jumped back and fired off 3 rounds in the middle of his panicked flail. His voice bounced off the cracked concrete and newly sprouted foliage, soon to be drowned out by guttural laughter. Damn, rookie, Cale laughed behind him, an evil smile stretched over his scarred face. You're just too easy. Damn it, Cale, Silas groaned as he tried to get his heart rate back under control. What the hell is your deal? He leaned heavily against the ivy-covered cement wall at his back to ground himself. I could have killed you. No, you couldn't have, the older scout chuckled back, even as he wiped a tear from his eye and trotted down the corridor like it wasn't even a possibility that monsters could be hiding in every nook and cranny. If I'm going to die, it's sure as hell not going to be by your hands. Oh, he was so infuriating. Silas would have loved nothing more than to wallop the still cackling man over the back of the head with a handy piece of crossbeam laying at his feet. But they all knew the rumors about Cale's 6. Silas would not win that fight. Hey, don't let him get to you, Mayish giggled, with a swift pat to the blonde's back. Silas was following Cale down the corridor, with Mayish bringing up the rear. And try not to worry so much. If Memphs are near, Dylan will let us know. Won't you, Dill? Nothing close, but you should probably keep it moving, came the young voice from their comms. I'm inclined to agree, a voice said from seemingly nowhere, and Silas just about messed himself again. A brick wall of a man stepped out from around the corner at the end of the passage. That SOS call only came in half an hour ago. They should still be here. It's been 6 years, Damien, Silas mumbled beneath his breath as they checked the next room along, only to find it empty. One more night wouldn't have killed them. Even saying that, he still glared harder at every shadow, just in case it was hiding something. Cale chuckled and slung an arm around the newbie scout. Silas had to bite the inside of his cheek against saying something, as Cale ran a hand through his raven locks and continued to prattle on. The guy's bracer hadn't even activated yet. How could he not be scared at a time like this? Aww, Cale teased, poking the blonde in the cheek. Damien, the baby is scared of the big bad Memphs. Damien shook his head at the man's antics. He truly felt pity for Silas, but it was self-preservation that kept back the reprimand waiting on his tongue. Damien hummed, watching the blonde swat at their resident maniac, and Cale simply backed off, laughing. That call was the first sign of survivors we've had in 5 months. We had to take it. The fact that the city was close was just lucky. Let's find them and bring them home. Yes, Captain Bashuk, Cale drawled sarcastically, before he cupped his hands over his mouth and bellowed at the top of his lungs. Hey! If there are any survivors here, we're here to rescue you. Come out, wherever you are, or we'll leave your asses here. What the hell is he doing? Silas panicked, scrambling up behind his mentor, expecting a Mev to crawl out of the shadows at any second, because it was totally just waiting for one of them to do something as stupid as draw attention to themselves. You'll get used to him, Mayish laughed quietly as he fell into step behind Damien, and they continued the search. He is batshit crazy. Loves his job a little too much. Really? Silas asked sarcastically. I heard he was a psychopath. Sociopath, actually. Cale chimed in with his 2 cents worth from his place beside the captain. That's what the doctor settled on anyway. They couldn't quite decide. Silas's gaze flitted to his mentor in confusion, and Maish wondered how many times he would sigh on this mission. He really needed to stop saying yes to the bright-eyed little teens who wanted to join the Scouts. Long story short, Cale escaped juvie during the outbreak, the Cape Tonian explained. The Hexers found him, he saved Dylan's life, Damien decided he could stay. I'll fill you in on the details when we get back. Why do we end up talking about this every time a rookie comes on a mission? Cale groaned as he peeked through a doorway into yet another empty room. It's not like mine's the most interesting story of the lot. We're all interested in things we don't understand, Damien murmured offhandedly, and you're as ununderstandable as they come. Aw, dames, you say the sweetest things, Cale deadpanned. Doesn't he just? Dylan interrupted over their comms line with a snigger. I've got a heat signature. 1 floor up and 4 doors down. Just in case you wanted to stop chasing your tails. It's quite big. Another hum slowly fired up, and a click of metal had Silas's eyes dropping to the bracer on Cale's wrist. A sword, elongating out of the mechanical arm guard, revealed true the rumors that the man didn't fight with a gauntlet. The smile that settled on his face truly made him look insane. No wonder no one besides the seasoned scouts would share a table with him in the mess hall. Eyes up, Silas, Maish warned, and the young rookie grimaced as needles from his own gauntlet shifted in his hand. You know, if you were going to be such a fraidy cat, you shouldn't have come, Cale whispered, the humor from his tone lost as they moved as a single unit. I'm not scared, Silas mumbled, gauntlets up and eyes sharp. Damien hushed them as they approached an open metal staircase, which had been taken over by some creep or other. Scuffling sounds came from above. Their ascent was quick and quiet. The air became thick as they entered the hallway of the 5th floor and approached a door. Half rotted away from age and hanging off hinges that had rusted beyond repair, orchids grew from the wood, pink and bright. This new world would do that. Stamp some beauty in the middle of a decayed city just for the hell of it. Something moved beyond the door, and they drew their weapons. We're coming in, Damien warned, but there was no response besides the sudden lack of movement. On the quiet count of 3, they flooded the room. It was not a nymph that hunched in the space beyond, and Cale did not keep his displeasure at that fact a secret. Silas, on the other hand, couldn't have been more pleased that 4 humans stood in the far corner. Typical nuclear family, only they looked half-starved, half-crazed, and the father was holding a gun, while a machete and the mother's thin frame were the only things that somewhat blocked her children from view. Who are you? The man demanded. He was big, ebony-skinned and abnormally tall. They must have been feeding him more so he could protect them. We don't have anything you would want, so leave us alone. Obviously, they had had contact with other survivors who'd wanted to steal their stuff. Silas remembered that from before the city had found him. It was harsh. This was a situation that would have to be handled with delicacy. Didn't you hear me? Cale returned, completely unfazed by the shotgun pointed in his direction. We're here to rescue you. Cale, Damien warned. He dropped his gauntlets to his side, but they didn't deactivate. We got your distress call, Maish offered gently, appealing to the woman. We're here to take you and your family somewhere safe. A girl popped her head out from behind the woman, and the hope on her face was shattering. It worked, she gasped, disbelievingly. My radio worked. It did, Maish smiled, but we need to move. We'd prefer to not be out when it's too dark. The man seemed to sigh a breath of relief, but he didn't drop his stance. He glanced over at the woman, and they seemed to have a silent conversation between themselves before he grumbled. All right. The scouts took that as their cue. They quickly surrounded the family and began their descent through the nature-strangled building. Everyone was hyper-aware of the daylight rapidly fading. Silas remembered Damien telling him about a rescue much like this one. They'd got cocky, and an attack had come from nowhere. They'd lost 3 scouts and the survivors that day. Stay alert. the former Special Ops captain murmured to the group once they'd hit the ground floor. There are 4 jets down the street. Ma'am, you and the boy can go with Maish. Maish tapped the woman's shoulder, and she grabbed a hold of her son. Sir, you come with me. And your daughter, she can go with Silas. Silas gave the girl what he hoped was an easy smile. When we exit the building, stick to your assigned person. Do not stop for anything. Damien, Dylan's voice transmitted to the team. I have heat signatures fast approaching from behind the jets. They'll be on you in less than 5 minutes. Cale whistled low and swung his sword across his shoulders. If those are more survivors, we're in for a very squashed ride home. And if they're not? The girl asked, worry obvious in her voice. If they're memps, we might not get home. Silas tried for humor, but it fell short thanks to the very real threat of death. Memps? The father asked, even as he cocked his gun. Later, Damien hushed him. We're going to make a run for it. Keep low and keep up. They sprinted from the building, reached the jets without any problems, but the heat sources were closing in. Silas, Cale, stay only long enough to find out if they're human, Damien said as they passed Maisha's jet and half the team broke away. Meet us back at the city. Sure thing, dames, Cale rattled off as they passed the captain's jet and the 2 large men scurried in. They just reached Silas's aircraft when the heat signatures came into view from behind the building. Memphs. All 5 of them. Cale! Shouted Silas when the man ran past their jets towards the threat. His anticipation palpable, and his bracer whirled as adrenaline coursed through his system. Get the girl inside. I'm going to need some backup, the man grinned manically. Damien said to leave, the blonde hissed. You wanted to be a scout, the scarred man chastised the rookie with a grin. This is what we do. Silas cursed blue bloody murder, but he hefted the girl into the plane and dropped back to the ground, just as the Memph pack got close enough to become distinguishable. Clouded grey eyes, razor-sharp teeth, and leather skin stretched over bone and wiry muscle. They were the most vicious things on the planet since the outbreak, and Cale wanted a 2-on-5 fight? Silas, officially, hated him. No one really talked about it. Obviously, there were the rumors, but it was common knowledge that Cale Six enjoyed his job a little too much to be considered healthy. He was, assuredly, a necessary evil in their current world, so many civilians pretended he didn't scare the living hell out of them and just left the man alone. As one of the firsts, they couldn't really condemn him to exile. He was part of the team that had brought most of them in, after all. It was practically thanks to him that they were alive. And now he was going to get Silas killed because he had a bloody hard-on for monsters. The Memphs approached at almost blinding speeds, and Cale ran out to meet them like a damned welcoming party. Silas followed. Why? Because Maish had told him that if anything like this happened, to stick with the team, and Cale was the only one here. Most of the scouts that Silas had met would rather run than fight. The Memphs moved so fast, the humans seemed to operate in slow motion by comparison. But Cale was different. He met the alpha of the pack head-on, and it went down so quickly, Silas might have missed it were he not looking. 3 Memphs slipped past, as Cale took the next one, and Silas's gauntlets whirled as he fired. He managed to gun down 2, when the last one barreled into his chest. He went flying and grabbed it about the neck to keep the snapping jaws away from him. One bite, and it would all be over for him. The stench of rotted flesh made him gag. The fact that it was so close made him scream, but the gauntlets were useless at this angle. No bullet would hit it, and then the creature howled. As its back was slashed open from tail to skull, it fell aside, and Silas watched in horror as its body started eating itself from the inside out. It screeched and cried until it fell still, its skin still melting away to reveal organs and bones as it went cold. The sounds of the world slowly ebbed back into existence after the blonde threw up, and with them, the laugh of a crazy person. Cale stood above the Memph, laughing so hard his smile threatened to split his face. Blood caught in the crinkles by his eyes, and the most terrifying war paint Silas had ever seen. Don't look so scared, newbie, Cale giggled, as his laughter finally began to die down. You just survived your first battle. This is a cause for celebration. He walked over to the nymph and pulled a canine tooth from its mouth. The thing was bigger than it had any right to be. He held the trophy out to the still shaking blonde. Now, let's get you back so you can brag about it. Silas nodded. Shock, most likely, setting in, but he still had a survivor to get back. He could have his meltdown when he was safely back in his tent. He reached up to take the tooth, and Cale helped pull him to his feet.